Being born as a Roman gladiator was not some glorious calling. It was a life of brutality, control, pain, and fear. Most gladiators were not noble warriors who signed up for fame and fortune. They were slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals condemned to fight. From the moment they were captured or sentenced, their fate was no longer their own. They were stripped of identity, chained like animals, and sold to a lanista, a trainer who owned and traded gladiators like livestock. They were dragged into a ludus, a gladiator school, where their lives became a monotonous cycle of physical torment, violent training, and psychological degradation. Every day began before dawn, under the harsh watch of brutal instructors. The training was not designed for honor or fitness, it was preparation for blood sport. They practiced with heavy wooden weapons to build muscle and coordination, but also to grind down their spirits. If they resisted or showed weakness, punishment was swift and cruel. Flogging, starvation, isolation. Their diet consisted of barley, beans, and mushy porridge. Bulk food meant to build fat over muscle to slightly shield vital organs in battle. They were called barley men, not with respect, but as a reflection of their status as disposable tools. At night, they were locked in dark, cramped cells filled with the groans of injured fighters and the stench of decay. Sanitation was abysmal and infection was common. Gladiators bore wounds that rarely healed and carried scars both physical and mental. They were dehumanized, made to fight not just for survival but for entertainment. When thrown into the arena, often the Colosseum, they faced not just opponents but the jeers of a bloodthirsty crowd and the emperor's gaze. Their fights were rarely fair. They could be pitted against more experienced fighters, wild beasts, or even sent in to die without a weapon, as part of a staged execution. Some died immediately, others lingered in pain before the fatal blow. A simple thumbs down could mean your end. Those who performed well might live to fight another day, but that survival came with a price. The more fights you won, the more you were paraded around as a celebrity of slaughter. But fame didn't mean safety. It meant more pressure, more danger, and more demands. Gladiators were also sexually exploited, often kept for the amusement of the wealthy. Their bodies were admired but never respected. Even the blood they shed was collected, believed to have magical or healing properties. That's how twisted the system was. You weren't a man, you were a spectacle. Gladiators formed bonds, but these too were fragile. A friend today might be your opponent tomorrow, and if you died, your body was discarded or dumped into a mass grave, forgotten by history. Occasionally, a gladiator earned their freedom after years of survival, symbolized by receiving a wooden sword, a rudis. But even that freedom was a broken promise. Most had no home to return to, no family left, and no trade to fall back on. Their bodies were ruined from years of injuries and their minds haunted by nightmares. Some had to keep fighting in smaller arenas just to afford food. Others became trainers, repeating the cycle. Escape was nearly impossible. If caught, the punishment was death by torture, meant to send a message to others. One famous escapee, Spartacus, led a slave rebellion that shook Rome but was ultimately crushed. His followers were crucified along Roman roads, 1,000 bodies left to rot in the sun. And while Rome celebrated, no one wept for the gladiators. They were built up to be symbols of power and courage, but treated as nothing more than tools. When the gladiator games finally ended centuries later, due to shifting moral and religious values, it was too late for the countless lives lost in sand and blood. They weren't warriors by choice, they were victims of a brutal machine. So no, being born a Roman gladiator was not epic. It was horrifying, exhausting, degrading, and deadly. It was a life with no control, no compassion, and no peace. It was Rome's darkest spectacle, built on broken bones and silent screams. And that's why being born a gladiator was not a blessing. It was a lifelong nightmare dressed as a show.